way to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Cheers very much for your company. You're watching on TV, listening on DAB and online. Today I want to know, is it about time that we had a Minister for Men in government? And I'll bring you up to date if you've missed anything in this huge weekend of sport. And if that's not enough, folks, the Minister of State for Northern Ireland, Conor Burns, will join me for a grilling from Grimes too. But first, it's the news with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's just gone 2 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB Newsroom. 3 government ministers and 2 shadow cabinet ministers have been reported to a parliamentary watchdog for allegations of sexual misconduct. That's according to the Sunday Times. It reports they're among 56 MPs who've been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme. The paper says allegations range from making sexual inappropriate comments to more serious wrongdoing, with at least one complaint believed to be criminal. Sir Keir Starmer has criticised the Met Police for not disclosing how many fines are being issued over Downing Street parties before the local elections. The Labour leader said it's in the public interest to know. The Prime Minister has already been fined once for attending his own birthday gathering in June 2020. Brexit Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg told GB News that there's more pressing matters than talking about events from 2 years ago.
Boris Johnson got those decisions right. He delivered the vaccine. He has led the world in terms of Ukraine. He is a great leader. And I think talking about things that happened 2 years ago is not the most pressing political issue by any means.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has also said civil servants shunning officers to work from home is a cost to the taxpayer. He's reportedly been leaving notes in Whitehall workspaces with the message, "Sorry you were out when I visited. I look forward to seeing you in the office very soon." He told GB News that while working from home works in some instances, those with jobs that are dependent on being in the office should go back. The UK's Trade Policy Minister has told GB News there's some indication the government's new immigration deal with Rwanda is already having a deterrent effect. The government announced the £120 million deal earlier this month. It will see asylum seekers who've crossed the channel in small boats sent to processing in Rwanda, where they'll have the right to apply to live. Penny Mordaunt told GB News the government will be ready to adapt if people traffickers change tactics.
You announce something that's really quite groundbreaking, you are going to get a lot of criticism and a lot of scepticism. But we will see. We will see if this is going to start to work. And no doubt the people traffickers will start to adapt their business model to try and circumvent this, and we'll adapt as well.
The UK's Defence Ministry says despite Russia making some territorial gains near Donbass, resistance has been strong. But in the Black Sea port, Odessa, at least 8 people have been killed as 2 missiles struck a residential building. In the southern city of Mariupol, Ukrainian soldiers continue to defend the final stronghold at the Azovstal steel plant. And as hopes of a ceasefire for Orthodox Easter Sunday fade, President Zelensky urged his people not to lose hope and said he still believes in the victory of Ukraine.
Protect us from discord and separation. Don't let us lose unity. Strengthen our will and our spirit. Don't let us lose ourselves. Don't let us lose the hope for victory and the feeling of our dignity, and preserve our freedom.
Voter turnout for the French presidential election between Macron and Le Pen stands at 26% so far today. That's 2% lower than 4 years ago, which analysts say might be down to uncertainty around who to vote for. The country will choose whether pro-European Union President Emmanuel Macron keeps his job or if the so-called far-right candidate Marine Le Pen takes the seat. Voting closes at 8 o'clock tonight. 10 of the 26 people on board a tour boat that went missing off the coast of Japan have died. That's according to the Japanese broadcaster NHK. They were all found near the northern island of Hokkaido. 7 patrol boats, 3 aeroplanes and 4 helicopters have been searching for survivors after crew made an emergency distress call saying water was flooding into the ship. The government is set to launch a review into women's football with an aim to bring it in line with the men's game. Following a fan-led review published last year, the study will focus on commercialisation of the sport, spectator support and media interest. It comes ahead of a summer of high-profile women's football, with England set to host the Women's Euro 2022 finals. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now. Let's get back to Darren Grimes.
Welcome to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. Here's what's coming up on the show today. On Wednesday, the Tory MP Nick Fletcher stood up in the House of Commons and asked the Prime Minister for a Minister for Men. Do we actually need one in 2022, and what would their role entail? Also, voters in France are heading to the polls to pick their new president today. Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron are polarising figures, so we'll be popping over to France to see what the mood is like there this afternoon. Boris Johnson has hinted that he will protect green levies on energy bills. This is despite Tory calls to scrap them. So this afternoon on Scrap Reform Keep, we'll be putting green levies to the test. I know what my opinion is. That's what we're talking about for the next hour. I'd love to know your thoughts, or much more important than my own, do we need a Minister for Men? Tweet me at GBNews or email me on gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can watch us online on YouTube, and don't forget about Facebook. Loads of brilliant content on there. Cheers very much. I'll never forget the email I received in 2020 informing me that I had to attend an interview. It was an interview under caution by the police for a possible offence under the Public Order Act because of comments made by a guest on Reasoned, the YouTube channel that I founded. After outrage from both sides of the political spectrum, the police, acting a little too much at the behest of Twitter activism and a little too little on the rule of law, if you ask me, quickly dropped the investigation. Still, I was lucky. I have a platform, right? I was able to fight back and stand up for freedom of speech and the press through the brilliant Free Speech Union. Police involvement brought about by social media pylons are happening all too often. One social media pylon was caused by an appalling joke made by Paul Bussetti from Croydon, who shared a video of a bonfire party from November 2018. Someone had placed a cardboard model of Grenfell Tower on top of this fire. The model had black and brown faces in the windows, and the gathering were laughing and joking about the Grenfell disaster, a disaster, let's not forget, in which 72 people lost their lives. Last week, Bussetti was handed a 10-week prison sentence, suspended for 2 years for, and this is what it boils down to, folks, for me, for making and sharing a joke. Yes, it's a dark joke to make about a disaster like Grenfell, but still, I don't think the police should be issuing jail sentences for sick humour any more than it should be threatening the arrest of broadcasters for comments that their guests have made that have gone viral online, right? We cannot have trial by Twitter. That's what I'm worried about. I don't think you have to be a free speech absolutist to share that view, to recognise that speech is in peril in Britain. Will Frankie Boyle be arrested for his joke about Katie Price's disabled son that he made in the past? Should Jimmy Carr, a more recent example, face the slammer for his joke around gypsies and the Holocaust? Of course not, because whilst we might be offended by vile jokes, ultimately they are just that, folks. They are jokes. They haven't incited violence. They didn't inflict harm to an individual or their belongings. They may make us squirm or want to leave an auditorium, a gig, whatever it might be. But a joke shouldn't be made punishable by law, in my opinion. This is nothing other than censorship by the state if we go ahead and do this. We are no better if we do it than the kind of authoritarian Russian ideologues that we're fighting against that seek to eradicate jokes against bad Vlad. We simply must turn back now before we well and truly throw the free speech baby out with the online harm's bathwater. Another topic that caught my attention this week was when, watching Prime Minister's questions, the Conservative MP for Don Valley, Nick Fletcher, called on the Prime Minister to introduce a Minister for Men. The position for Minister for Women was created by former Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair as a means of prioritising women's issues across government. So I thought it was only right to ask in our cultural segment, is it time for a Minister for Men? I'm joined by feminist activist and writer Jean Hatchett and Mike Buchanan, the leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys and the women who love them. Jean, can I start with you, Darren, please? What do you think of this idea? Do you think it's time for men to receive a little bit more priority in government?
I'm sure I'm here to say no and eye roll and all of those things, but I think at the moment there's a really crucial thing at the centre of this before we even discuss whether there can be a Minister for Men, and that's the question, what is a man? Because we're currently being put under, we're seeing politicians put under pressure to define what a woman is, but no one's actually asking what a man is, and until we sort that question we can't really go much further. I think it's important that we address the issues for men, male suicide, for example, which is at a terrible high and you know, significantly higher than for women. I acknowledge that. I have concern for that. But we also have to acknowledge the issue with men. And, you know, we have a real issue with men murdering people, but specifically men murdering women. There's a rape conviction rate of less than 1% in this country. And so we have a high proportion of men who are raping women. So I don't want to go down that traditional feminist route of let's just, when we're addressed with this issue of a Minister for Men, just smash into men. I think, you know, there are issues there to be addressed. But when we're talking about this, we've also got to look at why certain things can't happen that would solve issues for men around this question of what a man is. And so if you've got the case that it is unsafe for men to go into male space, then if they are wearing a dress or lipstick, for example, why is that impossible? Why must they then seek refuge with female people in female space? And I think, you know, there are some issues right at the heart of this with this kind of gender identity ideology, which pose questions for both men and women. But until we can sort that question, we really can't talk about a Minister for Men because we don't know what men are.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fundamental point. Mike, I'm assuming that you're a bloke, but how do you actually think we should go about this idea of a Minister for Men?
Well, I mean, for a start, I've never heard such complete nonsense as I've just heard, even from a feminist. Should there be a Minister for Men? Of course there should. The idea of having a Minister for Women, and by the way, there are three ministers. There's a Minister for Women and Equalities, a Minister for Women, and a Minister for Equalities. Jobs for the girls or what? I mean, talk about non-jobs. But there are so many areas where men's rights are assaulted, and I'm very pleased to be speaking with a woman whose website tells me that she is very interested in men's violence against women, nothing on there at all that I could see about women's violence against men. And I can tell you, I'd be happy to read out a few sentences which show that intimate partner violence in heterosexual couples, in the majority of those couples, the violence is mutual. Okay, so sometimes the man starts, sometimes the woman does. But in the 40% or so where the violence is one way, always one way, the perpetrator is twice as likely to be the woman as the man, and the victim twice as likely to be the man as the woman. And this has been known for decades. And,
so,
and
Mike,
the best place
in your opinion, this is long overdue then? We should have done this years ago?
Yes, I mean, to have a minister for women makes about as much sense as having a minister for rich people. Women and girls are already some of the most privileged human beings ever to walk the planet. The idea that they need specific ministers is absurd. And the reason it's so difficult to get a minister for men is that would put a focus on all the many disadvantages and human rights violations that men have in this country.
Right, yeah. I mean, Mike, I don't think Jean disagreed with some of the points there about the fact that men are facing a higher suicide rate, for example. Jean raised that herself. But Jean, it must be quite something to hear from Mike there that women are the most privileged beings to walk the earth, given that right now, I think, as you rightly point out, women risk being erased from the national picture altogether.
Absolute nonsense.
Mike, let Jean come back on that, and you can have your word.
I think I didn't know I was going to be speaking against Mike, which is why I've laughed pretty much through the whole of his segment. And it's kind of it's difficult to respond to that kind of viewpoint because, as I said, I'm very, very sympathetic to some of the issues facing men, like the largest cancer statistics in this country are breast cancer, but the second is prostate cancer. And clearly we have to address issues. I don't think it is, but, you know, I really can't, I can't really debate with somebody who is statistically inept. And I find that, you know, a bit of an insult to me because some of those statistics are being manipulated by Mike, and he's done that for many years now, but he's become a little bit of a laughingstock amongst most people. So, you know, 95% of perpetrators of domestic violence in jail are male. It's as simple as that. You cannot deny those figures. So I tried not to, drag it into that realm, but Mike has. So, you know, his statistics are inaccurate. But I really think, you know, when he's talking about nonsense, what I would ask Mike, if he wants a minister for men, and I haven't said I don't want a minister for men, what I've said is what they perhaps ought to address, as well as, some of the issues put forward by Nick Fletcher. I'd like to know, could then a person with a vagina or a female person be a minister for men, in Mike's view?
Yeah, well, Mike, what do you make of that? Because if we did have a minister for men, I wonder what you think the key role should be. What should it entail?
Jean has just raised an excellent area. There's never been a person of penis as a minister for women, has there? That's strange, isn't it? But to talk, prostate cancer has killed more men.
Currently, it could happen.
I tried not to interrupt. Prostate cancer has killed more men in this country than breast cancer has killed women for 2 or 3 years. But the point here, and it absolutely illustrates why we need a minister for men, is that there is no national screening program for prostate cancer. There are 2 screening programs for women-specific cancers, none for men. This is exactly
I think, Jean, your view, Jean, on that is very much you're sympathetic to those arguments, aren't you? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Can I point out that I suffer from ovarian cancer? So, you know, I nearly died. So I'd have sympathetic with either a male or a female suffering cancer and would like equity of access to healthcare for both those issues. Why would I not? But the point is that we are being asked to refer to women with ovaries not as women, we're being told that it's not okay to say the word womb and woman as a thing. And you know, I know this sounds like I'm going off on a tangent, but when you're talking about issues affecting men, then we're being asked to refer to ourselves as people with front holes. And,
horrible.
You know, this is not okay. And really, if we are targeting men's health issues, then why is that question never being asked of men, whether it's uncomfortable for them to be asked whether they can be pregnant or not. So there's got to be this real... We as feminists know, unless you address the question, what is a woman, you cannot have any rights attendant.
Well, speaking of that, Jean, speaking of that, another story that caught my eye today was concerning the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Angela Rayner. She has condemned what she says is sexist and misogynistic article, a Mail on Sunday article, which claimed that Tory MPs have accused her of a basic instinct ploy, Sharon Stone-esque, to distract Boris Johnson by crossing and uncrossing her legs during debates. This post has received massive backlash. The Prime Minister's got involved and says that he deplores the misogyny directed at Angela Rayner anonymously through this article. Jean, is this an example of women facing misogyny today, and Mike just needs to get behind you because actually misogyny is still happening, clearly?
Mike's never going to acknowledge that, and like I say, I don't really, I don't expect Mike to ever change his views or take any kind of rational or balanced viewpoint on this. That's not happened over the last many years that he's been trying.
Well, what do you make of this article then? Were you personally offended by this? The fact that the Mail ran this?
I heartily condemn that attitude amongst the male Tory MPs that have tried to say that that's the case. I think Angela Rayner is being treated appallingly there. I think, though, at the same time, that maybe this is Angela needing to recognise exactly what being female is and what that entails, because she's one of the proponents of the fact that trans women are women. Well, this is not happening to trans women. This is happening to a female person because of sex. And yeah, there's a deep misogyny there. There's a deep misogyny in the way that she's been represented as being less intelligent than Boris Johnson, because she would need to resort to feminine wiles, if you like, to advocate her points or her politics. And so that would never happen to a man.
Right.
And also
Mike, you answer that then. That would never happen to a man. This wouldn't happen to a male politician. They wouldn't see this sort of post in the Mail on Sunday about them, would they?
Darren, you have allowed Jean to completely derail a discussion about a Minister for Men by their current pet obsession. I could name 16 areas where the human rights of men and boys in the UK today are assaulted. I would very much like to hear, without talking about trans women, I'd very much like Jean to tell me areas where the human rights of women and girls in Britain today are assaulted.
So, Mike, did you not think that article about Angela Rayner was misogynistic in any way, shape or form?
I think people see misogyny everywhere. It is actually very rare, whereas misandry, the hatred of men and boys, is everywhere. And radical feminists like Jean, are the great exemplars of that. So I wonder, Jean, can you tell me some areas? I can give you 16 areas in a few seconds where the human rights of men and boys are assaulted by the state today, almost always to advantage women. Can you tell me any areas where, without talking about trans women, where the human rights of women and girls today are assaulted?
Okay, so as I've said before, we have a current rate where women are raped at a rate of about 78,000 to 80,000 a year.
Absolute
and we've
rubbish.
got you, sorry.
Rubbish.
And
70, I'd like to show your viewers.
Mike, you asked Jean a question, so you've got to let her answer the question.
Can I speak? So we've got women murdered at a rate of 1 every 3 days by men. We've got women raped by a current or former partner once every 4 days. We've got women who are systematically, failed by the CPS. That is a state institution, Mike. That is working for the state, such that we've got a conviction rate of less than 1%. So how can you then tell me, I am absolutely on board with you discussing the issues that you want to discuss, but you have to acknowledge that women are suffering really quite serious consequences of male violence. And if you're talking about Nick Fletcher, who is a close colleague of Philip Davis, who filibustered a bill in 2017, he spoke for 90 minutes to prevent advances for women.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, folks, but this debate could rumble on and on. But that was Jean Hatchett, the feminist activist and writer, and Mike Buchanan, leader of the political party Justice for Men and Boys.
Can I just
Thank you very much for your time. Now, plenty more to come this afternoon on Real Britain. Next, we'll be putting green levies through scrap reform keep. It looks like the Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going to keep them. But first, let's have a look at the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and sunny for many, though a few showers for northern England. Let's take a look at the details. In the southeast, a few showers around over the Isles of Scilly, otherwise it should be dry with some sunshine to end the day. Meanwhile, over the southeast and around London, there will be very little, if any, cloud. Temperatures will be in the mid-teens. For Wales, it will be a fine evening with plenty of late sunshine. There'll be a few late showers for parts of northwest England, and these may also clip parts of the West Midlands too. These are going to die out through the evening. Towards the northeast coast, there will be some murky low cloud feeding in on the onshore breeze. Further inland, things could stay fine with some sunshine lingering to end the day. 1 or 2 showers are possible for southern and southwestern parts of Scotland later. Otherwise, it will be a dry evening with variable amounts of cloud and sunny breaks. Across in Northern Ireland, it will be fine to end the day with plenty of late sunshine. The brisk breeze should have eased as well with light winds tonight. Looking ahead at the UK overnight, and any showers will die out with a touch of frost in rural northern spots. And that's how the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Real Britain with me, Darren Grimes. It's now 2:27 and it's time for scrap reform keep. Boris Johnson has suggested he's going to protect green levies on energy bills despite Tory calls to scrap them. But as we go through this cost of living crisis, can we really afford to subsidise these toys of the rich? Harry Wilkinson is head of policy at Net Zero Watch and he joins me now. Harry, thank you for your company. Where do you stand on these green levies? Because you're looking at, what, 150 quid added onto an energy bill for them?
That's right. It's about £150. I would scrap them from energy bills immediately. We're looking at huge increases in the cost of living for ordinary people. The fact that this hasn't been done already is quite staggering to me, because this is an easy way of providing much needed relief for consumers. The government doesn't have to get rid of the levies entirely. One option available to it would be to simply move that onto general taxation. Now, the government would then be left with a cost of about £11 billion a year. But in the scale of overall state spending, that would be a cost that it could absorb much more easily than I think the people who are being made to have their bills increased.
Right, yeah. I mean, Harry, I hear
£2,000.
what you're saying. I absolutely hear what you're saying. And the Prime Minister was very much against you in the scrap camp here. He was in the keep camp because he was arguing that investing now, subsidising green energy, would actually, in the long term, reduce energy bills because we're less reliant upon gas.
Well, it's worth looking in detail at the actual cost that we're paying from subsidising wind technology in particular. Most of those subsidies are through the renewable obligation. Those are legacy subsidies, but that actually applies to most of the wind turbines. And they're paid through a mechanism that pays an amount on top of the wholesale price for electricity. So far from actually reducing bills, they're automatically increasing them. And that's the vast majority of the costs from subsidising renewables. There's some new contracts that have come in, contracts for difference, and a few of those are paying back into the system. But we're stuck with this huge legacy bill. And actually, moving these costs onto general taxation wouldn't actually stop the government from investing in renewables if that's what it wanted to do.
Yeah.
But what it would
Harry,
do
I'm looking
would
at
provide a
your
huge
picture
amount of
there, and
relief.
I'm assuming that behind you, that's a gas boiler. Can we power that through these wind turbines?
Well, not without huge changes to households. The main alternative would be an air source heat pump, but that's £10,000 or so to buy outright.
Incredible.
You would then need to do potentially 10 to 20,000 pounds of energy upgrades. So these are really quite significant costs if we want to get people onto alternatives from gas boilers. And now is not the right time to be piling on these costs to people when everything else is going up at the same time.
Well, Harry, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm personally, the Prime Minister might be in the keep camp, but I'm with you in the scrap camp, because I just think it is a moral outrage that we are subsidising the pay packets of some of the poorest in our country to fund these great renewable forms of energy. But there we are. Harry Wilkinson, Head of Policy at Net Zero Watch, thank you for your time today. You're with GB News on telly and DAB radio. Next, we've got a Grilling from Grimes segment. The Minister of State for Northern Ireland, Conor Burns, will be in the hot seat. But now it's time for a check on the news headlines with Bethany.
Thanks, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 2:32. I'm Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. 3 government ministers and 2 shadow cabinet ministers have been reported to a parliamentary watchdog for allegations of sexual misconduct. The Sunday Times reports they are among 56 MPs who've been referred to the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme. Sir Keir Starmer has criticised the Met Police for not disclosing how many fines are being issued over Downing Street parties before the local elections. The Labour leader says it's in the public interest to know. The Ministry of Defence says despite Russia making some territorial gains near Donbass, resistance has been strong. On this Orthodox Easter Sunday, President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged his people not to lose hope and says he still believes in the victory of Ukraine. The UK's Trade Policy Minister, Penny Mordaunt, has told GB News there's some indication the government's new immigration deal with Rwanda is already having a deterrent effect. The deal will see asylum seekers who cross the channel in small boats sent for processing in Rwanda, where they'll have the right to apply to live. A man who was arrested after a knife attack near Coventry yesterday has been detained under the Mental Health Act. Warwickshire police say the 33-year-old injured at least 10 people during the assault in Bedworth town centre. 3 of them suffered stab wounds. Voter turnout for the French presidential election stands at 26% so far today. That's 2% lower than 4 years ago. Analysts say it might be down to uncertainty around who to vote for. The country will choose between incumbent President Emmanuel Macron and the so-called far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. On TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll get back to Darren Grimes in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel, and we're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 2:36 and it's time for our Grilling from Grimes segment. Quickfire questions to a person in a position of power. In the hot seat today, I'm delighted to say, is Conor Burns, the Tory MP for Bournemouth West and the Minister of State for Northern Ireland. Conor, thank you very much for your company today. Now, Boris Johnson returned from a successful visit, it has to be said, to India to discover that the senior Tory backbencher Steve Baker, former minister, says that the PM should be long gone and that he's sick of the cabinet sitting there fat, dumb and happy. Quite extraordinary stuff. What did you make of it?
Well, I've always liked Steve. I'm sort of reminded of the words of Lord Denning that two reasonable people can perfectly reasonably reach opposite conclusions based on the same set of facts without each surrendering their right to be considered a reasonable person. I disagree with Steve. We've got some processes to go through. I still believe the Prime Minister has a huge amount to offer this country. It's only 2 and a bit years since he won the biggest landslide for the Conservative Party in a generation, the biggest since Margaret Thatcher in 1987. I believe he deserves the opportunity to have the processes gone through, public to see the full facts, and then to get back to 100% focus on delivering for the British people.
Yeah, I mean, Conor, you're clearly well and truly behind the Prime Minister, but do you think it's inevitable that more MPs, especially backbenchers, are going to turn their back on Boris Johnson if further fixed penalty notices are actually issued?
Well, look, colleagues are unsettled, and that's totally understandable. This has gone on now for a long time, but the important thing is that the Prime Minister at all times has been genuine in what he told the House of Commons. He has told people the facts. Now, when things have emerged subsequent to his appearance in the Commons, he has come back and updated the House. But there are 3 processes now. There's the Met investigation. There's then the Sue Gray final report, which will come at the conclusion of the Met. And then there is the Privileges Committee process that MPs decided they wanted to enact last Thursday. I just think we got to hold fire, support the Prime Minister, let's get through the processes, get the facts out there, and then people can form a full judgment. But in the meantime, of course, it's unsettling for colleagues to be going through this when what they want to be focused on, what the Prime Minister wants us to be focused on, is delivering for the British people and the cost of living challenges, promoting the international trade agenda, which he was doing in India last week, supporting and marshalling the international community in our response to the horrible events going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, so your post bag there isn't filling up with people saying, I think Partygate is an absolute outrage. Is this a Westminster story, basically?
Well, no, I don't think it is. I think, in fairness to the public, there is a genuine anger which the Prime Minister has acknowledged. But I have to say, I was out yesterday. We don't have any local elections this year in my constituency area in Bournemouth. So I was out last week in my old stomping ground of Eastleigh, where I stood for Parliament in 2001 and 2005, helping our candidates there for the excellent MP, Paul Holmes. And I have to tell you, Darren, only one person that I spoke to yesterday morning in a couple of hours of canvassing raised this with me, and that was a lady who felt that there was a sort of a witch hunt against the Prime Minister. She was completely supportive of him. And that's not to diminish it, but I think that there are lots of other things that people are worrying about. They're worrying about the energy bills. They're worrying about how they're going to get their kids into the choice of school. They're worrying about the health service and how we're going to catch up from the pandemic. There's a whole range of things that people are worried about, and any of them have much more direct impact in their lives than this story.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think I'm certainly hearing from viewers of GB News that people just want this story to move on because there are real issues, real crises taking place right now that need attention. But the Conservative MP for North West Durham, my part of the world, Richard Holden, has actually called on police to reinvestigate an alleged breach of coronavirus rules by the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer whilst he was in the North East. Is this just tit for tat? Do you think this is a good use of police time? Personally, I think everyone's getting a bit sick of these things.
Well, look, again, I can totally get where Richard's coming from. I listened to a very good interview with Richard earlier this morning. And he's essentially saying, Darren, that there's big question marks over that event that Keir Starmer attended in Durham. It was in an office, whether it was a parliamentary office in a constituency or a Labour Party office, I'm not clear, but it's a local MP office. And he was there having drinks and a meal, socialising with people when he was on a campaign stop. Now, that was, from what I can see, very much against the rules at the time. Now, the police in Durham have decided not, apparently, to look at that. And I think my colleague Richard Holden is right to say perhaps the police should have a look at that in the light of what's happening with the Metropolitan Police. We often hear in politics the public say, well, there's one rule for you lot and one rule for us. There must be one rule, and it must be one rule for everyone, whether you're leader of the opposition, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and leader of the Conservative Party, and dare I say it, even a select committee chairman. Everyone needs to be held to the same standard.
Yeah, absolutely. The Prime Minister also didn't rule out a new law which would give UK ministers powers to actually override part of your brief, the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, this is the Brexit deal that purports to avoid a hard Irish border by keeping Northern Ireland de facto in the European Union single market for goods. Now, Conor, I don't need to tell you my view on this. I'm quite sure that everyone watching will be aware that I am a big Brexiteer and I don't like the idea of one part of my country being de facto in the European Union. But this draft legislation could well be published in May. Would you, in your role, welcome this?
Well, look, Darren, I'm spending, since the Prime Minister asked me to come back into government and asked me to serve in the Northern Ireland office, I've been the second minister in the 50 years of the existence of the Northern Ireland office, 50 years this year, who is from Northern Ireland. I spent at least 2 days a week there, and I'm getting out and about a huge amount, listening to businesses, voluntary organisations, visiting schools, community groups, and the like. And I have to tell you, Darren, that the fundamental problem with the protocol, we could talk in depth about trade diversion, friction at the ports, supply of certain goods and so on. Those are all very real. But what is also incredibly real is that a sizable proportion of the population of Northern Ireland feel that the protocol is fundamentally undermining their identity, their sense of belonging to their country, the United Kingdom. And we have got to act on that. This cannot go on as it is. And in fact, the protocol spoke, and forgive me, I have an extract from it here. It spoke of the unions and the UK's shared aim of avoiding controls at the ports and airports of Northern Ireland to the greatest extent possible. It recognised the application of the protocol should impact as little as possible on the everyday life of communities in both Ireland and Northern Ireland. That the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland would benefit from participation in the UK's independent trade policy. And it also recognised the importance of maintaining the integral place of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom's single market. And it's incredibly hard to justify, Darren, when you go to a retail shop. I went to one before Christmas in Lisbon, and the owner explained to me they used to have multiple varieties of shortbread. Okay, a small thing, shortbread. They now only have one, Walkers, because only Walkers are big enough to be able to absorb the costs of the certification and the transportation costs and the bureaucracy that now comes from moving goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. The other example I cite, if I may, Sainsbury's have no supermarkets in the Irish Republic, yet a consignment of goods destined for Sainsbury's supermarkets in Northern Ireland are subject to the same level of checks as goods moving through Northern Ireland from GB onwards into the Irish Republic and therefore into the European single market. This is not what we thought we were agreeing
exactly,
to.
Connor. This wasn't part of the Brexit promise, was it? So a lot of unionists will be feeling really, really quite hurt by this, and a lot of them have expressed feelings of betrayal, frankly, from the Prime Minister. Would you go as far as to say people have got a right to feel hurt by the Conservative government's actions over the protocol?
I think they've got a right, Darren, to demand that we fix it. And it's important, of course, to remember the political crisis we were in at the time the protocol came about. We were danger losing the whole Brexit thing altogether because of the mishandling of the government prior to Boris becoming Prime Minister. Look, I was asked a few weeks ago in Northern Ireland a question, a bloody difficult question. Somebody said to me, could you justify this if this was happening in your constituency in Bournemouth?
Yeah.
And the honest answer is no, I couldn't.
Exactly.
And that's why we are absolutely committed to sorting this out for the interests of Northern Ireland and Northern Ireland's place, integral place in our family of nations, in our United Kingdom.
Absolutely. Well put, Connor. Now, Connor, you have tweeted about this, so I know you've seen it. There's an article in the Mail on Sunday which said that Tories accuse Labour's Angela Rayner of basic instinct ploy, Sharon Stone-esque ploy to distract Boris Johnson. He himself has condemned the article. I mean, what did you make of this? Is this a sign of misogyny within the Tory ranks?
I thought it was a terrible article. I thought, if I may say so, Darren, I thought it was a piece of work that is a disgrace to your profession, a disgrace to journalism. I suspect it was somebody who is some non-entity having a drink on the terrace and seeking to overstate their influence and knowledge. I can tell you, Darren, as someone who sits often close to the Prime Minister in PMQ, sometimes behind him, sometimes nearby if there've been Northern Ireland orals immediately beforehand, the Prime Minister is absolutely focused on the questions coming across from Keir Starmer and other members of Parliament. The idea that the Prime Minister would be distracted by Angela Rayner is offensive, and the idea that Angela Rayner would use any aspect of herself in order to do that is offensive to her.
Absolutely. Well, Conor Burns, thank you very much for your time today. That was Conor Burns, Tory MP for Bournemouth West and the Minister of State for Northern Ireland. Now, folks, it is 2:47 and a massive fight took place last night. Tyson Fury beat Dillian Whyte to retain his WBC, I couldn't get that out of my mouth there, heavyweight world title in front of a crowd of 94,000 people. Massive numbers. But not just that, the football was on too. There was a Merseyside derby to look forward to later on the day as well. And the sports journalist Ross Heppenstall joins me to discuss these things. Now, there's only one place to start, Ross, right? It would be remiss of me to not. The 6'9", 6'9", Tyson Fury beat fellow Briton Dillian White yesterday. What actually has gone on here? Is this unprecedented?
Absolutely, Darren. It's an incredible sort of story, isn't it? Tyson Fury is this giant of a man, like you said, 6'9". You know, he's retained his title, and then he's declared his intention to actually retire from boxing, which is obviously a massive story in itself. Will Tyson be lured back into the ring? Potentially, you'd certainly think it's a realistic possibility. Right now, in the aftermath of the victory, he's saying that he will indeed hang up his gloves. But we've seen so many times, Darren, down the years that these great boxers, you know, he's already an extremely rich man, Tyson Fury. But it would not surprise anybody if he is lured back into the ring in the coming years, well, the coming months even. So,
yeah.
Time
Ross,
will
you know
tell on
what
that
gets me about Tyson Fury's story? I think it's such an important story for young men, because this is someone that went through a really, really difficult time and has quite an inspirational story. I mean, look what he's achieved, look what he's accomplished. It's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you could call him the Renaissance man, Darren, couldn't you? But when you see where he's come from, sort of rock bottom, you know, at one stage he hit 28 stone, so he absolutely ballooned in weight, and he's had to lose 10 stone to get ready for this fight. And he's had mental health problems, alcohol problems. He's successfully overcome all of his demons, and he's a world champion. It's like you said, Darren, it is an incredible story.
Now, on the footy, the Merseyside derby kicking off at 4:30, what does this mean for Liverpool if they actually win? Do you reckon they're going to stand a chance of fighting their way to the top spot?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite honest, Darren, there's no margin for error for Liverpool. They have to keep winning every single game, take maximum points, and hope, beyond hope, that Manchester City slip up somewhere. Today's the Merseyside derby. Their old adversaries, Everton, from across Stanley Park, are obviously desperate for some points themselves. But Everton have not won away from home in the Premier League since August. It's an absolutely pitiful away record. And I think right now, as we speak, Burnley are drawing with Wolverhampton Wanderers, which means Everton are currently in the relegation zone. So this is a massive game for both clubs this afternoon at Anfield.
And Ross, I would have liked to have spoken to you about the Magpies winning against Norwich yesterday 3-0, but apparently we're out of time, so I cannot rub salt in the Norwich wound. But never mind, next time. Ross Heppenstall, sports journalist, thank you very much for your time on Real Britain this afternoon. Now, folks, polling stations in France are open as voters are currently deciding the country's next president. GBNews reporter Paul Hawkins was in Paris for us earlier today, and he sent over this report.
48.7 million French people casting their ballot then in the second round of France's presidential election at places like this. In fact, a lot of them casting their vote at places like this, schools across France. We know that Emmanuel Macron has voted not long ago in Touquet, his hometown, and we also know that Marine Le Pen cast her ballot earlier today in Hennin-Beaumont. That is one of her bases, one of her strongholds. As she was entering, there was a child who she shielded from the sun with her hand and said, "I will protect you." Very dramatic stuff. But, you know, this is a very important day for France. There is the choice of 5 more years of Emmanuel Macron or a new presidency under Marine Le Pen. So just to give you an idea of what it's like to vote in France, there are some similarities with the UK and some differences. So similar signs to what you get in the UK when you go to vote here: no smoking, no scooters, no phones, no dogs. Who knows? Maybe cats are allowed into polling stations, but certainly not dogs. Pardon. When you come in, unlike the UK, where we put a cross on the ballot and we decide and we tell people how we're going to vote, here in France, you get given 2 pieces of paper. Certainly, this is what happens in the presidential election. There are legislative assemblies later on in the year, which is a bit more like the UK, where you vote along party lines. But essentially here you get, if we just step out short here, pardon, you get 2 pieces of paper. You get Marine Le Pen, paper with Marine Le Pen, and then over here you get a little bit of paper with Emmanuel Macron. You select which bit of paper you want. You then take a blue envelope over here. You can see the little blue envelope there, and you're going to use that envelope to put your choice in. But But you don't make your choice until you go into one of these booths with the curtains, so you get a lot of privacy when you're making your choice. You take your piece of paper, you put it in the envelope, and then you're ready to go. And the key thing here is you don't have to pick a name. You have to pick an envelope if you do come to vote, but you don't have to pick a name, so you can cast an empty envelope. And of course, voter turnout is key. 72% is expected to be, which by French standards is low. You then go with your envelope, which might have your ballot in, along here. You come up to the desk here. There was a queue earlier. It is now lunchtime in France, so people are having their lunch, but essentially you get up to here. You let me just move out of the way. You give your registration and details over here, your identification, your driving license, your passport, your national identity card, and then with your envelope you then place it into the box. And at this polling station it's a little bit different. They like to give a little bit of drama. So when this man casts his vote, she makes an announcement. Have a listen to this. There you go. So that's the president of the polling station. She makes a little bit of drama out of it. It's nice, really. Over here, it's a lot quieter. It's a bit more discreet over here. You just place your envelope in and that's it. But over there, they say, so if it was for you, Sir Alistair Stewart, for example, or whoever, it would be Sir Alistair Stewart a voté. And that is it. You have voted. You have exercised your democratic right to vote. And that's going to happen here across France until 8 o'clock French time this evening. That's when we get the exit poll. That's when we know if Macron has another person's voted, if Macron has won, and we find out, or possibly Marine Le Pen, not probably, but possibly, and we find out by how much that margin of victory is. Marine Le Pen and her campaign team will be in one of the two French parks in Paris, one of the two parks in Paris, I should say, whereas Emmanuel Macron will be underneath the Eiffel Tower. So big day for France. Whoever gets in, there are big challenges ahead, not least how they are going to govern the country with the Legislative Assembly on the way. That's basically when French parliamentary elections, and neither party is expected to dominate those elections, which means whoever becomes president will have to probably rule France along with a prime minister from a different party. It's called cohabitation in France, and that's probably going to be the likely outcome in a couple of months' time. But still, big day for France here.
Well, thank you for that report there. We were real France for a minute, thanks to our reporter, Paul Hawkins. But that's it for Real Britain today, folks. You've been watching me on TV, DAB and online. I've been Darren Grimes, and I'll see you next Saturday at 2 p.m. Here's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking fine and sunny for many, though a few showers for northern England. Let's take a look at the details. In the southeast, a few showers around over the Isles of Scilly.